Majo John Madden in Vega de la Torre in central Mexico. And I'm going to rant about personal freedom in the U.S. and Mexico. It's different. It's very, very different. And the U.S. is an extraordinarily control-oriented country with all kinds of laws that are not necessary, or which, if the same law is there in Mexico, it doesn't get enforced. I hear people talk about motorcycles. Okay, how about that? In Mexico, seatbelt laws motorcycle laws are about the same as in the U.S., but they're not enforced, especially in rural areas. Possibly in cities, in big cities, but Mexico is mostly not big cities. There's an awful lot of space and a lot of small towns. I just did some research on motorcycle laws in the U.S. and Mexico. Check this out. In Vega de la Torre. Bernardo! Hola, senor! You're going to be on YouTube, man. That's my buddy. He lives right behind me in the same property where I live. And he popped up on a video I did the other day, a little short video just a block away from here. I didn't even know he was in it. There was people back home at the restaurant said, "There's Ronaldo." So, yeah, motorcycles. 3-up is common in Mexico. In the U.S., the law on motorcycles is they have to have a separate seat and separate toe pegs. No. Kids on motorcycles are really common. Babies, you see a couple with the girl carrying a baby all the time. 3-up is real common. 4-up happens on motorcycles. Or one or two people carrying all kinds of huge things going down the road. So it's different. You know, in the U.S., the big social divide these days is the right-wingers. We say the right-wingers are the Trumpers, or the country people, versus us good liberals, us progressives. I'm more and more getting it why there's such an urgency among so many people in the U.S. to fight back against the government taking our rights away, because they do. In the U.S., it's all control-oriented, and lots of rights get taken away. You know, like seatbelt laws. What business is it of the government whether I wear a seatbelt or not? That's my business. And I've been hoodwinked into just taking it for granted. Oh, of course, there's seatbelt laws. When I went to the country, within weeks, my seatbelt policy in my camper van was, you can use seatbelts if you want. You fucking find it. Because both of my vans, the back seat, forget finding a seatbelt. Forget it. Freedom. Mexico, the belief is that the person is sovereign. Give its power to the people, much more in Mexico. You don't mess with each other. People won't gossip about each other because that's messing with each other. Let that person be. Let that person be. Starts from childhood in the U.S., where we systematically teach children to be afraid of strangers. Build in fear. Control your kids. Don't let them make eye contact with strangers. Don't let them interact with strangers. As a result, kids are taught in the U.S. to be afraid of other people. And it continues into adulthood, where in Mexico it's so common to say, well, we express ourselves, you know, we're just real. Our emotions are on our sleeves. What you see is what you get. But no, especially middle-class people in the U.S. are really controlled. But I've had young people here say, it's no fun to talk to American teenagers. because they're so stiff. They're like wood. They're like a board. And I have to continually factor into my interactions with Mexicans that they're going to have much greater level of emotionality, and it doesn't mean anything except that that's who they are. In the U.S., if a woman was as emotional in my direction as women will be down here, it's like, whoa, something's happening here. No, they're just being themselves. That's how they express themselves. I feel dramatically freer in Mexico. Let's talk about leash laws. In the U.S., it's in most of the country. Now, in the countryside, it's different. Dogs don't wear leashes in the country. But in any big population center, there's a case in point right here. Dog just there. He may possibly be even with that guy. Because there are some dogs that are with people, that are owned, that are part of the family. And they will trot along like that on the loose. But there's tons of street dogs in Mexico. Now, I recently spent the day in Martinez yesterday, a 60,000 person town, where I saw very few street dogs. But Vega here, they're all over the place, El Diamante. The notion that a dog has to be on a leash regardless of how well behaved they are is one of the most oppressive things about the U.S. I fought that law for the last several years. Back in Asheville, North Carolina, where I lived for 16 years, my deal was my dog would be on a leash, but dragging it, walking as a free agent, dragging his leash. But on the beaches of Texas and Louisiana, oh man, battle after battle after battle. Why do the vast majority of U.S. dogs have to be imprisoned on a 10-foot leash? Part of it is that we don't really understand how fabulous that species is, how deserving of freedom. But, someone will say, well, I was bit by a dog, and I want every dog in the U.S. to be on a leash because I get uncomfortable. Yeah. It's my right to say that no matter how good that dog is, no matter how well behaved, because there's the possibility, street dogs in Mexico are not aggressive. I have run across one who has on occasion been genuinely aggressive to other dogs, but not to people. We have this notion that if we let the dogs run around off leash, people are going to get bit all the time. It's rare. It's very rare. But we build our laws around worst case scenario. Cover your ass. Don't get sued. I worked for AT&T for a long time. It was a very control-oriented company because it had deep pockets. It was the biggest company in the world at that time. Deep pockets. So people would want to sue. So AT&T had a policy for which way the toilet paper should be rolled in the dispenser. Because, God forbid, something should go out of control and people sue us. Yeah. Freedom. So when we have our whole discussion about how do we get back to be in connection with each other in the U.S., start with saying to a lot of the people on the right, you're right. Government is intruding in your lives too much. I'll do a whole separate thing about cigarettes. And what started me on this whole thing today was I didn't have enough money today to buy a pack of cigarettes. And I just to price them, I went into this shop across the street, Super Lorena, and said, how much for a pack of cigarettes? And he said, 6 cents. I said, no, that can't be right. He says, yeah, I'll say a cigarette is 6 cents. I said, well, in the U.S., you cannot legally buy a cigarette, single. And I just was doing research, NIMH, it was all about how do we keep people from undermining this law because it's so important not to sell loosies. Why? What right do you have to decide that a person cannot buy an individual cigarette? It's bullshit. Yes, it is. It's bullshit. Amen.